Hi, this is Ms. Hadi from Olympian High School. Mr. Hammond and I are going to introduce you guys to Chapter 16, and we're going to do a series of videos to help you learn it. But first, let's get into some basic information you need to know. So this chapter is about India and the Indian Ocean Basin, and specifically about post-classical Indian Ocean trade. So we've been learning about the post-classical period. Now, technically, the post-classical period is anytime after 600 CE all the way up until basically 1450. But for our class, we've mostly focused on 1200 to 1450, but we taught you a little bit about some things that are before that time period, just so that you wouldn't be super lost when we get to later time periods and we reference some of these earlier dynasties that you should know. So chapter 13 was the Byzantine Empire, so post-classical period. It's what was left over of the Roman Empire after all the other classical empires fell. In chapter 14, you studied mostly the Umayyad and Abbasid empires. In chapter 15, you studied mostly the Sui Tong Song dynasties. And in chapter 16, it's going to be a little confusing because we're going to see sort of the de-evolution of centralized imperial rule from what was centralized imperial rule, or at least more centralized imperial rule, during the classical period under the Mauryan and Gupta dynasties, into a period of political division. So there's going to be temporarily centralized imperial rule under King Harsha, and then regional kingdoms. So it's not the same as in other parts of the post-classical world, and I want that difference to be apparent from the get-go. So we'll study the Sultanate of Delhi in the north after we study King Harsha's kingdom, and then the Chola kingdom, the kingdom of Vijayanagar in the south. So just to make sure that you guys all know where we are, we're talking about South Asia, which is this triangle, kind of shark's tooth looking area, and its impact on Southeast Asia, which is the darker shade down here. So modern countries in South Asia today include Burma, now it's called Myanmar. You have other places like Thailand, which used to be called Siam. You have Indonesia, so make sure you're familiar with where we are in the world. So we're here in India, but it's going to have an influence on this region, just like the Dar al-Islam had an influence beyond its territory. So the chapter starts off with a vignette, a little story to get you excited. It's talking about Buzurg ibn Shahriyar's Book of the Wonders of India, where he tells some tall tales, means he exaggerates. Maybe his lying is a less polite way to say it. But the important and interesting part of that little vignette is it gives us evidence of how powerful the Indian Ocean trade was and how it's going to influence nearby regions. One big difference I want you to notice between India and other classical areas that we studied in, or areas that we studied in the classical dynasty, is that India has no centralized imperial authority for a long time. So it had the temporary reunification or re-centralized imperial rule under King Harsha, but most of its history in this post-classical period is going to be regional states. It's not going to see another big centralized empire until the Mughals, which is much, much later. A similarity between them and other post-classical societies is that they're going to influence nearby areas and promote economic integration in the region. So as you're reading the chapter and looking at our videos from me and Mr. Hammond, look for changes in continuities. For example, notice the new religion of Islam and how it came to this region. Notice how Islam and Hinduism spread from South Asia to Southeast Asia. So of course, Islam doesn't start in South Asia, it starts in Southwest Asia, but once it gets to South Asia, it's going to go to Southeast Asia. Notice the spread of the caste system from the north to the south. Notice the influence of India on Southeast Asia, essentially, but look for all the other skills that you're supposed to look for when you do the skill drill. This should say maritime technology, so I'll fix that real quick. I want you also to pay attention to causes and effects. So maritime technology combined with port cities, and entrepot is the correct pronunciation of this word, which are basically areas that are cities that have trade, commercial centers, is these two things together are going to combine with basically thriving nautical technologies to help diffuse culture and ideas throughout the Indian Ocean. So all the area that is touching the Indian Ocean is going to be influenced by the Indian Ocean trade. So religions are going to spread, ideas are going to spread, and all that. So you guys should know about chapter 9. Now, if you didn't take ancient world history, you wouldn't know this. Here's just a quick recap. In the classical period, 600 BCE to 600 CE, we saw two major dynasties, the Mauryan and the Gupta dynasty. The Mauryan dynasty was centralized and it was Buddhist. If you don't know what that is, pay attention to the next slide. So it was Buddhist, and later on we're going to see changes to Buddhism. I'm actually going to take that part out right now because I just want you to know that it's Buddhist for now. And you can always go back and read chapter 9 and get extra information. It reaches height under an emperor named Ashoka. If you took my class, then you learned a little bit more about him. There were two regional kingdoms, the Bactrian and the Kushan. You guys can read about that. And then there was the Gupta dynasty, which was smaller and more decentralized than the Mauryan dynasty, and it was also Hindu. I'm going to do another intro video where I tell you about Hinduism and Buddhism in case you aren't familiar with these religions, and then we'll begin the chapter with the very first slide about the fall of the Guptas and the rise of King Harsha's kingdom.